Well, honestly, I did not expect to be doing another one of these videos where we're talking about the Nintendo Switch 1 and its physical games. Obviously, I own a lot of games here. A lot of this is stuff that is out of print with the Nintendo Switch, as the Nintendo Switch is one of the most unique systems when it comes to physical media, because it's very expensive to make these physical cartridges. In fact, Nintendo has strict rules when it comes to reprints and stuff like that, which has led to some games be ridiculously expensive that should not be expensive on the Nintendo Switch. And we've been doing this for the last couple of years, but I had intended on ending this series once the Nintendo Switch 2 came out. And I was sticking true to that word until I started to realize that, you know, the game keycard situation that's going on with the system is probably not going to be addressed until sometime next year. So I made the decision to continue this series until the Nintendo Switch 2 game keycard situation gets fixed, as that looks like it's going to be addressed at some point. Now, I don't know how much longer we're going to go with this. We've done 10 of these already. This will be part 11 of the Nintendo Switch games you should buy before they become rare. Y'all love this series to death. As I've said many times before in this series, this is just us speculating. This is nothing official. I don't want somebody telling me that they bought 10 copies of one game because they thought that this game was gonna somehow help them with their next house or whatever. I don't want any of those type of comments. So I figured let's do this again. I know you guys have been wanting it, so I got a nice list of games that I think has the potential to be going out of print and be something pretty expensive. Let's dive right into it. Starting off on this list is honestly one of the best games to play on Nintendo Switch in my personal opinion, but the reason that it's got a physical copy is pretty interesting. That game is none other than Stray. The reason why I say that this is pretty interesting is the person that published this was Skybound Games. I was very surprised because the company that's helped with Stray in the past could have done it themselves, but for some reason they chose a different publisher to go with the physical copy of the Switch, and it probably comes down to what I talked about before with how the Switch is a very unique system when it comes to physical media. It's very expensive to make, and you have to hit a lot of requirements to make a physical copy. As I've mentioned before, Limited Run has talked about this all the time, and the Limited Run retail store only exists because of Nintendo's extreme rules in making physical copies. And I think that's part of why they went with a different company, as they didn't have the budget. And Skybound Games has done quite a few Switch releases. One of the iconic ones that I think you guys will remember is they actually did the Baldur's Gate release. That sold out so fast and they did not reprint it. None of the Skybound games, from my understanding, has been reprinted. And Stray is such an iconic game right now. It's slowly becoming more and more popular. I do believe people are going to start leaning towards the Nintendo Switch version, especially with the Switch 2 coming out, especially with all of these third-party games getting updates and sometimes automatically running better. And Stray is a perfect game to be added to that, and something pretty cheap that you can find right now. I expect this to go out of stores at some point, as we are coming up on that 1-year mark, and games like this tend to start leaving store shelves after it being released for a year. So definitely be on the lookout for this. I think it goes on sale sometimes, but as of right now, it has not been reprinted, and I think the fact that Skybound had part of the publishing is what will help make this be out of print pretty fast. All right, this next one, I'm gonna be completely honest. Something that I do with these videos is I try to completely avoid limited run games when it comes to making this list. Now, there has been some exceptions that I have done to where I'm like, oh, I think this could really spike up. I might wanna let people know about this. And we've probably had maybe 3 games of limited run into this series when it comes to their limited set, and I try to avoid doing that. But this next one I feel like could genuinely become a really, really expensive game, and considering the type of game that it is, I would love for you guys to go ahead and get this before it becomes expensive, because this is such an iconic game for a lot of people. That game is none other than Yakuza Kiwami. Now, you might be asking yourself, Max, why are we putting a limited run game? Why is it Yakuza? What's going on? What has made you to think that this could be something very expensive soon? Now, in the previous Nintendo Direct, they had just announced that Yakuza Kiwami 2 is coming to the Switch 2. Along with that, they announced that Kiwami 1 is getting a Switch 2 version. With Sega and how they do things, we might have to pay for the upgrade of that. I'm not totally sure. Sega has sometimes been generous and sometimes have not. With all the stuff that came out day one with the Switch 2, there was no Switch 2 upgrade and you had to buy the game all over again. And I don't really know if that's going to be the same thing here, but what's been most interesting about the Switch 2 release is that they confirmed that Kiwami 1 and 2 will get separate physical copies. Now, I don't know if that's going to come to America. It's confirmed for Japan. I expect it to hit here in America, considering how popular this series is starting to become here in America. But Limited Run did the Switch 1 version because Sega did not want to do a physical copy for this over here in America. And the reason why I say the Switch 1 version is one to be on the lookout for, especially before Kiwami 1 comes out with that Switch 2 version, is this is the only version out there that actually has it on the cartridge. It's been confirmed that there are going to be game key cards on the Switch 2 when those games come out physically, and obviously there's a lot of boycotting with game key cards and stuff like that, and I think that's going to have people gravitate towards getting this. That way they have the actual game on cartridge and can probably get the Switch 2 upgrade of some sort if one exists. Or, I mean, the situation could be unique if we don't get that, because we've seen games automatically run better without the update. Overall, I think with that being said, I think the interest for this release will be very high, and the best thing about this is, yes, it is limited run. You can't buy it anymore. However, they have a partnership with Video Games Plus to where you can go ahead and purchase this game at retail price. So I highly recommend you go ahead and do that before it sells out, as I do think, considering it's Yakuza and the only way to have all of it on cartridge for Switch 1, I think this could end up being probably one of the most expensive games on the Switch in this video, at least, later down the road, especially with how serious people are taking the game keycards. Next up on the list is one that I'm kind of surprised that I'm putting here, because I did not expect to learn the information that I learned about this, but that game is none other than Xenolade Chronicles X. Now, this game recently just came out from Nintendo, and honestly, I thought this game was going to do pretty well onto the Switch. However, I did realize that it was announced out of nowhere with no promotion. The Switch 2 was coming out. This game was kind of just thrown in the middle of everything. And I think that's what led to a lot of people not picking this up, because it did not do as well as all the other Xenoblade games that hit onto the Switch. I think a few reasons go into that. I think one, as we talked about it before, no advertisements, and of course the Nintendo Switch 2 was coming out like 2 months before this. And I think a lot of people might be holding out on purchasing this game, because it's been found that there is a 60 frames per second mode into this game, but it's not onto the Switch 1. And I think whenever there's an edible update coming for this to the Nintendo Switch 2, whenever that drops, I think that is when people are going to want to grab onto this game, onto Nintendo Switch 2. I'm not expecting there to be a Switch 2 version of this game. I think it's going to be a free 60 FPS update, and I think that will probably happen in some Nintendo Direct, and whenever that announcement happens, I think that's when people will start buying this game, and then it's going to be really hard to find, because it was like one of the last Nintendo games. Like, I know Nintendo's still making games for the Switch 1, but as of right now, this was one of their last releases on the Switch 1 since the Switch 2 has been out, and I don't expect this one to get reprinted other than maybe Video Games Plus. So I would definitely be on the lookout for this, because we've seen with Xenoblade games that they go up pretty high at times. Like Xenoblade 2 was like $100 at one point. I think Torna was like 130. And I think X could suffer the same thing. And hopefully people start playing this game more, because I greatly enjoyed it. Just need to go back and finish it. This next one is probably one that you guys didn't even realize existed, because this was released out of nowhere with literally zero promotion. And I'm surprised that something like this even got a physical release. Burger Time Party. Yes, the same Burger Time from the old school NES days. This is one that, for whatever reason, this company was like, we want to make a Burger Time game, and Burger Time got brought back. I'm pretty sure this released during COVID, and that might be one of the reasons why no one was paying attention to this game. This literally came out of nowhere, and again, I'm so surprised that it has a physical release. The obscurity of this, I think, is surprising as well, and I think that's one of the reasons why people will gravitate to wanting to pick this up. For one, retro reasons, and two, the obscurity of it. And I think this is something that you can get for about 50 bucks right now. I definitely would pick up this one. This is definitely one that I feel like once we're done with the Switch one and people are collecting more with the Switch, they'll see this and be like, oh my gosh, I need to pick that up. The obscurity of that. As we've seen a lot of obscurity games for all systems be the ones that are the most expensive ones. I don't think this will be one of the most expensive Switch games, but I definitely think at some point it's gonna be more than $50, and I just can't believe they brought this back. This one's a very interesting one, as I'm surprised at the way that this all came about. That game is none other than No Man's Sky. Now, I'm sure y'all are aware that No Man's Sky used to be one of the most hated games of all time. And then Hello Games, they got made fun of, but they came back, they locked in, they cooked, and actually fixed everything that was wrong with No Man's Sky, adding all the updates that they promised was going to be in the game. And when this came to Switch 1, I think a lot of people were surprised, as we weren't really sure if the Switch 1 could handle this, as a lot of third-party games have not done correctly on it. People will rush it, but Hello Games cooked with the Switch 1 version. It was one of the best Switch 1 games I have ever played when it comes to a third-party developer. But here's where it takes an interesting turn. The Switch 2 comes out, and Hello Games announces that a Nintendo Switch 2 version of No Man's Sky is now available, and it consists of a free update. Yes, a free update. I was surprised to hear that because they added the rest of what was not in the Switch 1 version into the Switch 2 version. One of those things being the online multiplayer. That was something that everyone was really wanting in the Switch version, and the developers heard and they put it on the Switch 2 version. It's an entirely different game having the Switch 2 version. And what I'm really surprised about this is that Hello Games is not doing a physical copy for the Switch 2 version as of right now. I don't know if this is going to change once the game keycard situation is addressed. Maybe that's what they're waiting for. But this is the only way to get No Man's Sky physically, and it's all on cartridge besides the Switch 2 version. And you can get this game pretty cheap. Now, I'm kind of rolling the dice with this one because this is a bigger IP, but we've seen some of the bigger IPs be really hard to get on Switch because of how these Switch cartridges are made, where developers aren't going to want to do a reprint. And I think the interest for the Switch 2 right now, people are going to gravitate towards getting this physical game. That way they can have it physically and get the Switch 2 version at the same time. So I definitely think you should be on the lookout for this, especially with like a buy two get one free deal from GameStop at the pre-owns. That's probably a game you'll see pre-owned. This next one is a pretty new release, and I don't even know what we call this release because it relates to Pac-Man, but I don't know if Bandai was trying to make a new IP out of Pac-Man, but that game is none other than Shadow Labyrinth. Now, this is a game that has been weirdly announced out of nowhere. There was jokes when we were watching at the Game Awards. I was like, wow, look at this. This is gonna be a Pac-Man game. And it actually ended up being a Pac-Man game in that trailer. It also was a part of that Amazon show, The Lost Levels, where what? Like, that show was interesting. Kind of speechless at times. It even has that PlayStation game that got canceled so fast. I don't even remember the title of it. Well, it's that PS5 game. Dude, Coleman's gonna put an image of it. It's been memed all around the world because they shut it down and that show still came out with it. Bandai tried to make something out of this and they made a game. And this game right here has been heavily reviewed, and a lot of people are not liking it. And I think because of that, this game is not going to do well, and you're not going to see any type of reprints done for this game. This game is probably going to be thrown out of shelves pretty fast and be a forgotten game. This is something that I see that a lot of people could be interested in picking up towards 5 to 6 years from now, and then that's what will spike it up. because the obscurity of it being Pac-Man, but not Pac-Man, but is Pac-Man. It's like a dark Pac-Man game. I don't know. This was a weird thing that Bandai did. I kind of want to know what was going through their mind with this release. But for $30, definitely think you should pick it up for the Switch 1 as it's all on cartridge, and there is a free Switch 2 version out there that you can upgrade through the eShop, and they're not going to do a Switch 2 version. In fact, there was a physical version coming to the Switch 2. It was a game key card, I'm pretty sure, at one point. Then they scratched that and made it into a code and box, and then they just flat out canceled the whole production of it. So this is the only thing out there physically for it, other than the other consoles, of course. This next one is a limited run game. However, it's not your traditional limited run game where it's part of the limited set. This is one that Limited Run publishes, and you'll see at other stores such as GameStop, Target, just you name it, it's on there. Amazon, that's also another place that you can buy this game. That game is none other than Glover. Yes, Glover got brought back on modern day consoles, which is something that I never expected to see have happen, but it's here, and it's recently been having restocks on Amazon all the time, but it keeps selling out like crazy. And one of the things that I'll say about this is another game that you can find on Video Games Plus that has it for retail price. And I know eventually Limited Run's starting to put more of their stuff out at like GameStop, for example. This is probably one that will be hitting GameStop shelves pretty soon at some point, as their bigger releases tend to do that. And I think, again, people see this and they're like, wow, they brought that back. I gotta get that. I think the obscurity of it is what's gonna have people be interested in picking this up. And it's definitely one that I think you should get before it spikes. I don't know how much this one's gonna spike, but I could definitely see this one being like a $70 to $80 game in my opinion. This next one is probably one of the craziest horror games that I have ever played, and that game is none other than Oxide Room 104. Now, this game, I feel like is kind of a hidden gem, honestly, when it comes to horror games for the Switch. I see no one talk about this game. So I'm kind of surprised that it got a physical release when it did, as it's just kind of a random thing to see get physically made. And what's even more interesting about this game is that it got a sequel. No one knows about the sequel, and I think that that's very interesting, but the sequel didn't come to the Nintendo Switch 2. I'm sure it will at some point as the development kits start to get made more and be easier to get for developers. But the fact that this obscure game got a sequel, and that I believe that the only physical version out there for this is the Switch version, I think a lot of people are going to gravitate towards this and want to pick this up, especially those who really like horror games for the Switch. We've seen some horror games on Switch be crazy prices now. Like Outlast, for example, is like a $500 game. And I think people are going to want to play this game. I think it's going to be one of those games that out of nowhere becomes super popular. And I think the physical copy is definitely one that you want to be on the lookout for. Also, interestingly enough, when you buy the physical copy, you like plant a tree somehow. I don't know how this works. One plant tree for each copy sold. That's kind of unique. This next one is a critically acclaimed indie game that I'm honestly not 100% sure if I wanted on this list, but I figured I will roll the dice because I feel like I have pretty reasoning as to why it should be on here. That game is Tunic. One of the reasons is because it's through Fangamer. We've seen a lot of the Switch stuff through Fangamer be out of print pretty fast, but there's been some things like Undertale and Stardew Valley that's still easy to get. However, I'm pretty sure that Tunic is officially out of print and they're no longer making this, as I'm not seeing it at any retail stores anymore. But another reason why I have this on the list is I know with the Switch 1 that the frame rate was kind of all over the place when it came to this game. Sometimes it'd be really good, and then sometimes it'd be like, ooh, this is kind of rough. And with the Switch 2, I'm pretty sure it's been fixed with that without there being an update, and maybe there will be a Switch 2 version to this game at some point being advertised, and I don't expect that to get a true physical release with the game keycard mess that's going on. And I think that's what's going to gravitate people going to the Switch 1 version. So, like I said, kind of rolling the dice on this one. I'm not 100% sure on this one. And for our last one is none other than Lunar Remastered. Now, this is one that had an interesting release. The physical copy kind of came out of nowhere, and it was sold exclusively to Amazon. And what was interesting about it is that it kept selling out. And they have said moments of times that they do not want to put this on other retail stores, that it's just gonna be on here for right now. Maybe in the future, it'll go to things like GameStop. But this thing has kept selling out. I think as of right now, you can still get it, but at some point, this is gonna be sold out again because it's Lunar. This is a critically acclaimed thing for a lot of people. And I expect that, again, the obscurity, the fact that it got brought back onto the Switch in terms of a brand new physical copy, people are going to want to get that at some point. And I think when more and more people realize of its existence, that is when it will become harder to get, because eventually this company's just going to be done printing it, in my opinion. I think you can also get this at Video Games Plus, but it might be like $5 more. Not 100% sure on that one. Guys, those are 10 Nintendo Switch games that I think you should buy before they become super rare. Now, as always, I definitely want to hear from you guys. Do you like the list that I have? Is there stuff that you agree, stuff that you disagree, stuff that you think should have been on this list? Let me know in the comments down below. I always like to read these comments because I think a lot of us have good ideas, and then some of us have responses to our own ideas. And, you know, I just think it's a nice time to, you know, comment and stuff. I think it's always a nice discussion, and it'll be very interesting to see what the comments are like with this, with the whole game keycard situation, as that's a very interesting comment situation right there. But without further ado, guys, I have been talking for way too much. Make sure to backslash that subscribe button, like the video, check out the Twitter, Discord, Instagram, all that good stuff in the description below. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace. Wait, I forgot. Monado Marine membership, $5 a month, helps the channel tremendously. You can join with the little join button. It's our YouTube membership, $5, and there's a link also. You know, I'm being told I need to advertise that more. Probably, I don't know. I did my thing, so we can end this video, I guess, because this is becoming awkward now.